Characters need goals and goals need motivation. We're going to discuss this today, so stick around. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. One of my subscribers requested a video on the subject of character goals and character motivations. What we're going to focus specifically on today, I'm going to explain what a goal is, what a motivation is. Then a little later on, I'm going to talk about how a hero's goal is going to compare to a villain's goal. And at the end of the video, we're going to go a little deeper and we're going to explore the 4 stages of motivation, but we'll save that for the end of the video. For now, let's start off by defining what a goal is. And a goal is what the character wants. And it's going to be something that is tangible, something that can be obtained within the story. And you can think of very basic things for this, things like victory, money, romantic love, family, catching a criminal, survival, delivering the stolen data tapes, etc., etc. There's a lot of potential things that a character may want in the story. Now, the thing about goals, they're not interesting enough on their own. Just because a character wants something doesn't really make that desire interesting, nor does it make that character interesting. If you want to make them interesting, however, what you need is motivation. And what motivation is the why behind the goal. Why does the character pursue their goal? What's that emotional reason behind it? And more importantly, why should the audience care? Why should they get invested in this character? Why should they want to see them achieve that goal? That's something important to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind with motivation is that it usually involves an emotional state that the characters want to achieve. In other words, they're thinking things like, I'll be happy if I achieve the goal because this will happen, or because I'll be surrounded with these kind of people, or because I'll be able to obtain this, or I'll be able to live like this, or whatever it may be. There's always some kind of emotional dream at the end of it where the characters are really hoping for something good to happen. Now let me give you a quick example of a goal and a motivation, and it's a very basic example, and for our goal we're going to use something that I'm sure many of you who are watching this channel have as a goal of your own, and we'll say the goal is to write a novel. That's a very basic goal. It's not particularly interesting on its own, but if we include a motivation, it could become interesting. And various motivations that you might consider adding on to this, you might say that your character craves a challenge, or maybe they love storytelling, or maybe they value self-expression, or someone encouraged that character to write a novel, or maybe somebody told that character that they could never write a novel, that they're not good enough, and now the character wants to prove them wrong. There's a lot of potential motivations you can use here, and each one could be different, and each one could make the character more interesting or more easy to root for. Alright, now let's talk about hero goals and villain goals. And the thing about this is that heroes and villains are usually going to have some sort of overlap with their goals. They might be the exact same goal, or they might be different but with some kind of connecting tissue going on. Now, in the case of a hero and villain having the same goal, an example of this would be the movie Rocky, the first Rocky movie. And in this movie, Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, they have the same goal. They both want to win a boxing match. And that's great because it gives them something to fight over, it gives them inherent conflict between the two characters, and what makes it even more interesting is that each character has different motivations. Rocky's motivation is that he wants to prove to himself that he's a contender and that he's not a bum. Apollo, on the other hand, his motivation is that he wants to give his fans a show, and he wants to promote himself as the heavyweight champion of the world. He also wants to make a lot of money as well. Now, a hero and villain don't always have to have the exact same goal. Sometimes they could have completely different goals, but you need to connect them together in one way or another. An example of this would be the movie Die Hard, and the main character, John McClane, he's a New York cop, and his goal in this story is to rescue the hostages who are currently being held by terrorists. Now, the villain of this story, the terrorist leader, Hans Gruber, he wants to steal money from a vault that is inside Nakatomi Tower. So those are two different goals. But the way that they're connected in this story is that both sides, the hero and the villain, they both want control of the building. Because if John McClane gets control, then he can rescue the hostages. If Hans Gruber gets control, he can steal the money from the vault and launch his escape plan. Alright, now before we wrap things up, I want to talk about the 4 stages of motivation. And this is not something that I came up with on my own. It was actually something that was taught to me years ago by a mentor of mine. Her name is Ellen Brock, and she's a professional editor who I worked with back in 2018. And she has a YouTube channel of her own. She gives a lot of detailed advice. If you're into that sort of thing, definitely check her out on YouTube. But she has done some blog posts on the subject of goals and motivation. And one of them involved these 4 stages of motivation. And the way it works is that you start at the surface. You start at stage 1, which is the goal, which we already talked about. That's what the character wants. Then you move a little deeper to stage 2, which is the motivation. Again, we talked about this already, and it's the emotional why behind what the character wants. Now, if you want to dig a little deeper, you can go to stage 3, and this is the deep, dark belief. And what this is, it goes off the idea that your character's motivations are caused by a certain belief that they have about themselves, others, or the world around them. And oftentimes this belief involves fear, something they're afraid of or something they're afraid of becoming or whatever it is. And for an example, we'll go back to Rocky. We already talked about how Rocky, he wants to win a boxing match. That's his goal. His motivation is that he wants to prove to himself that he's a contender, that he's not a bum. And then his deep dark belief would be that Rocky believes he's not smart and he fears that uneducated people don't amount to anything or they can't amount to anything. That's his deep dark belief. And this is something that he struggles with throughout the movie. It's something that haunts him throughout his life. Now, if you want to dig even deeper with your characters, you can go to stage 4. And this is the origin of the deep dark belief. And what this is, it's an event in the character's life that led them to develop that particular belief about the world. So in other words, it's some piece of backstory, it can be a conversation, an event, whatever it is, that helped them develop that deep, dark belief. Now, during the movie Rocky, we get a glimpse into the origin of his deep, dark belief. And we get this during the date he goes on with Adrian. If you remember, they go ice skating on Thanksgiving, and he has a conversation with her, and he tells her,
My father, he's, my old man, he was never too smart. He says to me, you weren't born much of a brain, you know, so you better start using your body, right? So I've become a fighter.
Based on what we can actually infer from the actual story, this is probably the origin of his deep dark belief. And when you are considering your character's backstory, remember this sort of thing. When you're trying to build your characters from scratch, ask yourself, okay, what is their deep dark belief and how did it come about? What's that important piece of backstory that led to the character believing this and that eventually led to their motivation and finally helped define their goal that they currently have in the story? If you're ever struggling with writing characters and they just feel like they're two-dimensional or they're paper thin or they're just not clicking with you, think about these 4 stages. Ask yourself, okay, what's their goal? What's their motivation? What's that dark belief? And then what's the origin? If you do the work to understand and develop your characters, your readers will appreciate it. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, in the current story that you're working on, what is your main character's goal and what is their motivation? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of either one of my novels. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.